If you were a deadbeat god on the brink of being forgotten, what would you do? Well, you're gonna have to take menial plumbing jobs, wash plates, and even scrub toilet floors just for people to remember your name. But will you be able to get serious enough to fight back when your new bestie's life is on the line? Stay till the end. I'll break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the evil phantoms in Noragami. This world is full of monsters that are out to kill people and cause, well, kicking their own bucket, so to speak. Especially in places like this random classroom, where the students are about to write a surprise test. When the students start picking on this totally random girl for being weak, she prays to the gods for help, because she sees a fear monster outside her class window. What she doesn't know is that her request is heard by this goofy-looking dude outside. His name is Yato, and despite his doofus look, he's actually a god. He calls his weapon Hanki, and uses it to slash through the monster after reciting a cool incantation. After he destroys the monster, the weapon changes itself back to a girl, and she's got news for Yato. She tells him that he's too stinky to be a god, and he doesn't have a shrine to his name, and basically he's a loser. So she ditches him, and Hanki quits being his Regalia, and blackmails him with fake tears into releasing her. Losing weapon within the first few minutes of the show. Yeah, makes me think that Yato was not that competent of a god after all. And frankly, can you really blame her for wanting to free herself as a Regalia? No one wants to be stuck with a freeloader, especially one that is a god and a god that doesn't even have a shrine to his name. And that's not his only problem. In Greek history, for example, the gods of Olympus, Zeus, Poseidon, Hera, and the likes were all very kind to their followers, well, to a degree. Not just because they were benevolent gods, but also because their existence was tied to their being worshipped. A god without followers that worship them is like Ernesto de la Cruz in the movie Coco. No worship, no one thinking about them, praying to them, they're on their way to being forgotten forever. Because once nobody remembers a god, they're gone, they cease to exist. So keep that in mind. Yato could have done several things to help himself stay alive and stay relevant as the most popular gods do, and also not lose his freaking sword. For instance, in the age of the internet, there really isn't much you need to do or know to be considered a god, and there's a lot of idols in the 21st century. In America, for example, to become an idol, you just have to have a talent and develop that talent and get a large fan base. Whether it's singing, rapping, dancing, being a comedian, working out. Because of the internet, everything is 1,000 times easier and harder at the same time. And since all Yato needs to do to stay alive is to be remembered, bro, just go viral. You're a god, right? So it should be easier for you. With this level of skills and acrobatics, he should be able to achieve virality in just a day, do some sort of crazy stunt on TikTok. People won't think it's real, but he'll get the attention that he needs to survive. You see what I'm saying? Ride the waves of the algorithm and just push himself forward. Considering that TikTok, Instagram, and all the other social medias have payment metrics for their creators, he could become like a freaking streamer! Stream his elimination of different phantoms, do wild and weird stunt for views, and once you rake up a sufficient view count, you can use the money generated to build a shrine. Look at that! I came up with that in like 5 minutes! With the money coming from the shows, his live streams, and viral posts, Yato could very well become a very successful 21st century god without having to face the embarrassment of being abandoned by his sword, just because he doesn't have a house and he's got like sweaty palms. Anyway, Yato uses graffiti to do some publicity for himself. He writes an ad saying that he will solve any problem and puts his phone right next to the illegal ad. He gets a call that someone called Milord is gone missing. When he finds the missing poster, it's the cat. Well, he's got to start somewhere. Shamelessly, Yato begins his search for the cat, and he has no idea that he's not the only one searching for the cat. He walks past the girl named Hiori and her friends, and what he doesn't realize is that she can see him. But instead, he looks past the cat that he's been searching for, and gosh darn it, he's eager to earn that 5 yen. He jumps into the road after the cat, but Hiori sees him, and in an act of selfless stupidity, she rushes into the road and pushes him out of the way of a moving vehicle. Now, Hiori scolds Yato for rushing into the road without looking, but that's when he points out a more pressing issue. It's her spirit that's talking to him. Her body is way back there at the scene of the accident. Later, she wakes up in her father's hospital, but when she tries to talk about the other guy she saved from the accident, she realizes that nobody else saw him. And that night, Hiori hears lots of voices of creatures lurking around the hospital. And that's when she also sees him hiding under her sheets, so what the frick? That's a little bold. He introduces himself to her as Yato, and though she's never heard of him, and after confirming that she's okay, Yato just disappears into the night. The next day, Hiori heads down to school. However, after classes end, she can't shake off the feeling that she's forgetting something. So when she sees my lord's missing poster, she abandons her friends and decides to search for him alone, because she believes the cat will lead her to Yato, and she's right. She runs into him at night while he's busy hunting my lord. But she finds him at a bad time because he's running away from a phantom, because Yato don't have a sword no more, so he's defenseless. So Hiori uses a special move that she learned from her favorite wrestler. But even so, Yato has to save her because our girl doesn't realize how much danger she's in. Because when she goes soul hiking without her real body, like that's dangerous. After delivering the cat home, Yato explains Hiori's situation to her. Because she almost died, she can interact more freely with the world of the living and the dead. And he warns her that she would lose her body randomly. And that's when she begs him to help find her a cure. And he agrees for a token of 5 yen. A few weeks later, Hiori slips out of her body again and goes soul hiking on electric poles. Turns out the villagers are real. But while hiking, she sees 3 strange looking phantoms. She also sees a storm, a haze of black clouds that draws phantoms to itself. But instead of returning to her body like a normal person should do, she goes looking for Yato. When they meet, Yato warns Hiori to be careful because she's very vulnerable in her soul form or ghost form. He explains that phantoms are drawn to her because they want her to become one of them. Hiori says that Yato should help fix her to prevent her from being in constant danger. But instead he goes on a monologue of what he intends to do with the 5 yen she paid him and blah 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 blah. Hiori doesn't care. She's only interested in him doing what she wants, which is to find a cure for her. After some goading, he finally explains that he can't work on her request until he gets a new Regalia. According to him, Regalia are weapons for gods. Just then, Yato gets a call from a new customer and disappears. So she decides to go searching for a Regalia for him. Meanwhile, Yato heads down to his customer's house and washes toilets. And he also changes the taps. Some god of war he turned out to be. After getting his 5 yen payment, he heads down to another god's shrine to sleep. And that's when Hiori calls him with good news that she's found him a new Regalia, and he appears immediately. But instead he finds another phantom. Apparently Hiori doesn't know the difference between a Regalia and a phantom. Hiori tries to fight off the phantom after she loses her body, but luckily Yato grabs her by the tail just before she becomes Phantom Chow. Although the phantom bites him, Yato manages to escape and do what he does best, which is run. When they're far away, Hiori sees a wound on his hand caused by the phantom's bite, but he warns her to not touch it because it could corrupt her. He also warns her that her tail is not a tail, it's her lifeline, and if it gets cut, she will never be able to enter her body again and she will die. The monster attacks them again. Just then, Yato finds this floating spirit spark. He forms a contract with it and calls it Yuki. After that, it turns into a sword and flies into his hand. You know, like a really cool Bankai moment, and Yato gets a flood of the spirit's memories just before he gets eaten by the monster. And inside the belly, he slices the monster open, and later the sword turns into this cool looking boy. But when Yato tries to give him his shirt, the boy named Yukune is just like gross because it reeks of sweat. That night, Yato takes Yukune shopping at a clothing dump. But Yukune is not impressed with his new master, especially because there's no food, and they have to drag fish with a cat. Great. Later, Yato extorts food from Hiori, and they eat their fill. And when they step out, Yukune looks at Hiori in a weird way, and Yato gets a sting on his back. He immediately cautions Yukune to steer off the perverted path because their minds are linked and whatever Yukune thinks or does affects him. Shortly after, Yato gets a call for a new job. Just as he's about to disappear with Yukune, Hiori jumps on them and she gets teleported too. And when they land, they're in another god's shrine, the god of learning, Tenjin. Immediately, Yukune and Hiori show Tenjin so much respect that Yato just turns green with jealousy. Tenjin teases Yato before asking him to help out with some phantoms in schools because it is exam season. But just to press the knife in a little deeper and rub some salt, Tenjin sends his Regalia, Mayu, to be Yato's guide. The only problem is, Mayu is Yato's former Regalia. Yeah, the same one who quit working with him earlier. Ooh, that's cool. Mayu introduces herself to Hiori and Yukune and informs them that Yato was the same doofus who she was working with. They head off to a train full of storms where people have committed many kicking of the bucket repeatedly. But while Hiori gets fired up to get rid of the same storms, Yato casually says that if they want to kick a bucket, they should be allowed to. Hiori thinks it's just, rude and insensitive, and they get into a fight, and Hiori storms off. But before heading out, Yato tells Yukune that it is time for his first job. Hiori tries to take on the phantoms by herself, and she ends up strapped to a railroad and nearly dies. Luckily, Yato shows up and saves her. And then, together with Yukune, he saves this nerd from just getting dead and becoming train paint. After they save the kid, he explains to Hiori that it is difficult for Regalias to see humans throw away their lease on life. Because Regalias were once living people, and they're people who still want to live. Okay, look, Hiori does not understand the gravity of her situation. She could drop her body, and it could get kidnapped at any point. That's a problem. Also, if she dies or gets hurt very badly while in ghosty mode, it's bye-bye to the real life. So how about we make finding a cure for her situation the real priority? Look, normally we all come with our spirits bound to our body, but in Hiori's situation, it's peculiar because she had a near-death experience, and that makes her more prone to doing stupid stuff, apparently, that she just, well, couldn't do before. So to solve this and save her, how about we take her to a hypnotist, put her in a trance, because the problem started from the moment she had the accident, right? Forgetting the accident ever occurred in the first place would make her forget all of the things that happened as the result of the accident. In psychology, this is called theory of interference. Essentially, interference occurs when some information makes it difficult to recall similar material. Similar memories compete, causing some to be more difficult to remember or even forgotten entirely. And because of this, some long-term memories cannot be retrieved into short-term memory. By using interference through hypnosis, we will stop Hiori from ever dropping her body again, because if she can't remember the accident, she will lose the symptoms and the effects that follow the accident. Basic cause and effect, people. Also, while waiting for the effect of the interference to take place, the hypnotist could bind the spirit to the body with a binding spell. And that's a full-on binding ritual that we're not going to get into right now. Once it's done, she should no longer be able to leave her body the way she currently does. After the incident, they head down to one of Tenjin's shrines to sleep. But what Yato doesn't realize is that somebody is watching him in the distance. The next day, Hiori brings them some food, but she wants Yato to finally listen and grant her request. And instead, Yato says his dreams are all going to come through because he bought some random stuff from a strange woman. Hiori and Yukune immediately realize that he's been swindled, and when the storm settles, Yato takes Hiori to see his girlfriend, Kofuku. Don't let her innocent look deceive you. She is one of the 7 gods of fortune named Ebisu, but she's really the goddess of poverty. Yato introduces Kofuku to his team as his girlfriend, but the ruse only lasts a few seconds before this bearded Osan kicks the living poop out of Yato. Yukune and Hiori think that he's Kofuku's real husband, but he's just a Regalia, because like we said, Kofuku is a goddess. Anyway, after Osan sends Yato flying with a super kick, Kofuku warns Hiori and Yukune that despite Yato's calm demeanor, he's really a very, very dangerous god. Before they can go into any details about why he's so dangerous, Yato returns and grabs Yukune because they got a job to do. In a few seconds, they appear midair and accidentally fall on this dude who tells them his entire life history. Turns out he met a cutie and things were going good for him, but the longer he stayed with her, the more his fortunes changed. He lost his job and now he was about to commit kicking his own bucket. And as Yato listens, he realizes that the poor nerd dude over here had a run-in with none other than Kofuku. So he decides to help the poor guy out by telling him just to forget all about her, and then he uses Yukune to cut off all ties the dude had to Kofuku. And the best part is, all of this happens while they're in midair. Osan scolds her for having an illicit affair behind him. Everybody's impressed with Yukune because severing someone's ties is hard, even for experienced Regalia. But as Yato and Yukune leave, Hiori stays behind to get the tea on why Kofuku said Yato's dangerous. And that's when she learns that Yato once killed a Regalia. Because despite how good it looks, Yato is a god of war. He grants whatever wishes people ask of him, even if it means killing other people. When Hiori is ready to leave, Yato joins her and tells her to always run to Kofuku if anything happens to him. And while they're away, this strange-looking stalker of a girl named Nora shows up and tries to woo Yukune. However, as soon as Yato shows up, she reveals that she is one of Yato's old Regalia, and she tells Yato that she's still waiting on him to call her for help. That evening, Yato teaches Yukune how to draw a borderline to keep phantoms out. It's a trick only Regalia can perform, but he's impressed with how strong Yukune's first attempt is. And that's when we realize that Yukune is a freaking genius, but when Yato calls Nora his friend with benefits, a wink, Hiori decides to keep Yukune away from his irresponsible owner. So she tells Yukune to move in with her. At home, Hiori and Yukune try to settle in while Yato sneaks in with Hiori's parents. Later, when Hiori confronts him, Yato warns her that the nighttime is dangerous for their kind because there are lots of spooky things that just go bumping in the night. And to top it all off, Yukune is afraid of the dark. Yato knows this because he was flooded with Yukune's memories when he made Yukune his Regalia. That night, Yukune joins Hiori in her bed because he's afraid of the dark. But when he starts getting pervy thoughts, Yato shows up and stops him. However, they do have a bit of a fight and Yato heads back inside. And that's when we see this really badass looking goddess fighting storms. Yeah, she's important, very soon. The next day, Hiori and Yukune go shopping, but when Yukune tries to steal a skateboard, Hiori stops him, and this makes him mad, and he runs away from her, and he's like, meh. Except, Yato reminds Hiori that every time Yukune gives into his temptations, Yato gets stung. Yato explains that Yukune still faces temptations like when he was still alive, and that's why it stings, and unlike him, Yato cannot sin because he's a god and gods do no wrong, not even when they kill. Hiori worries that Yato is going to kill Yukune like he did his former Regalia, so she goes searching for Yukune. Meanwhile, Yukune is all alone. He doesn't realize the night has fallen, and he tries to head back, but he finds a little girl afraid of the dark, and she attaches herself to him. Turns out the little girl is dead, and she's just waiting for her mother to come with her usual offering. However, when Yukune unintentionally tells the kid that her mom is gonna show up, she gets mad and then corrupted by a phantom, and Yukune draws a barrier to protect her from the phantom, and that's when he finds out that she's also been blighted. Double whammy. Hiori saves him from being Phantom Chow, and Yato shows up just in time to save both of them. Yukune asks Yato to save the girl because she's merged with the phantom, but when Yato tries to save her by slicing her up to bits, Yukune goes blunt. And Yato explains that she's been fully possessed, so purging her is the only way they can help. Yukune is reluctant, so Yato forces him to do his job. And that's where things start to go downhill. Yukune heads back home with Hiori, but when he sees a phantom on his food, he pours out the food and runs away. And he's been on edge for most of the day because Yato used him against his will. Later, he heads down to the mall and steals some stuff for himself. And for everything he steals, Yato gets blighted. Later, Yato finds Yukune and asks him where he got the skateboard, and he lies. And before he can scold Yukune, a whip comes flying to his face. Turns out our god is wanted by other gods. Well, particularly this god named Bishamon, the goddess of war. Unlike Yato, she has thousands of followers and Regalia, and Yukune tries to ditch Yato, but Yato ropes him in on the fight. Meanwhile, Hiori just stands there pretending to just not exist. And as soon as Bishamon chases after Yato, Hiori runs to Kofuku for help. When they're out of sight, Yato scolds Yukune for blighting him with his sins, and they talk for a bit, and Yato decides to face the greatest goddess of war head on. And it doesn't help that Yukune doesn't feel like joining the battle either. Yato blocks one of her attacks, but when Yukune hears that Yato has killed a Regalia in the past, he has no motivation to fight because now he's terrified of his owner. Hiori meets up with Kofuku and learns that Yato is actually a god of calamity, a god that causes great disasters. Turns out the Regalia Yato killed in the past belonged to Bishamon. Kofuku decides to intervene, and Hiori tracks him by smell. Once she's gonna lock on his scent, they head out. Meanwhile, Yato is already injured from fighting the goddess of war with a blunt Yukune, and now Yukune just poofs back into human form, but when he asks Yato why did he kill Bishamon's Regalia, Yato brushes off the question with a stylish answer. This makes Yukune insecure, and he blights Yato some more, and this gives Bishamon all the time she needs to catch them. As she gets ready to strike Yato down for good, Kofuku shows up and separates them by creating a storm of phantoms. That's her thing, because she causes bad luck and poverty wherever she goes. So, things were looking rough for Yato and Yukune, but honestly, Yato's to blame. For starters, Yato and Yukune should have had a proper sit-down conversation way in advance of all this. Yes, I know, talking things out, the ancient art of talk no jutsu, no, it's not dead. And in fact, it's alive and well and highly effective. Think about it, before Yukune, Yato evidently had a Regalia that was strong enough for him to not only fight against Bishamon with all of her Regalia, but also to kill one of her Regalia and still escape with his life and limbs intact. That means when Yato gets serious, he's actually strong enough to fight against this one who is all juiced up with all her followers. So imagine how strong he will become whenever he does get followers. And that's not all, because although Yukune is still new to the whole Regalia business, which is really cool, but Yato's pointed out that he is like too strong for a new Regalia. And this means that with Yukune as his weapon, he has double, if not even triple the chances of survival. And this is supported by the fact that Yukune was able to cut the first set of bullets aimed at Yato. The fact that their camp fell out was because Yukune doesn't know enough about his master to trust him properly. Yeah, they've been together for a while now at this point, but they've never really had any heart-to-heart conversations. Trust is built on consistent effort and honesty. It involves demonstrating integrity, keeping promises, showing respect for others. Yato and Yukune might have everything else down, but they are strongly lacking in the area of trust, and it is due to a lack of communication. If Yato had just taken a freaking moment out of their really, to be honest, not so busy days, Yukune would not be so freaking terrified of Yato. Because let's face it, folks, Yato and Yukune are in a symbiotic relationship. Yato cannot exist without Yukune because he'll be vulnerable. And the same goes for the kid. And this means the only way for them to survive is to be open and honest with each other. Despite the interruption, Bishamon's lion, Regalia, bites Yato, and that's when Nora shows up in the shadows and immobilizes the lion, giving Yato just enough leeway to escape and slash one of the lion's eyes. And it forces Bishamon to retreat, because he's the brain of all our operations. But before retreating, Kazuma bows in gratitude to Yato, and this makes our girl think. Later, Yato goes down to the purifying streams to cleanse his blight, but the holy water isn't doing much because the blight is too strong now. And that's when Nora shows up again. The next day, Hiori opens Yukune's room to give him some chow, but she finds Yato relaxing, and Yato informs her that Yukune is gone because he's run away from home, and Hiori goes to Tenjin's shrine to find him. And her hunch was right because he stopped by there. And while she's there, Tenjin explains what Nora is, because that was the reason he turned down Yukune. Nora is Regalia with more than one master, so basically Nora's like a hull of a weapon. However, before Hiori can ask any more questions, Tenjin's Regalia sends her on her merry little way. Meanwhile, Yato remembers his last encounter with Nora. She warns him to throw away Yukune before he gets blighted beyond repair. And while he's busy reminiscing, Hiori runs into Kazuma, Bishamon's Regalia, and surprisingly, he protects her from Bishamon by making her invisible. He informs her that although Yato is their enemy, he doesn't hate him because Yato helped him. However, Kazuma warns her that Yukune needs to be disposed of because if not, something bad would happen to Yato soon. Later that evening, Yato finds Yukune and drags him off to his new job. While there, Kofuku shows up and Osan gives Yato a job they don't want to handle. However, before Yato can accept it, Hiori points out that he's really not looking good. And then he feels a sharp pain in his side and he turns around and scolds Yukune because he knows Yukune just moved something that doesn't belong to him, but he denies it. However, as he runs out of the store, Yukune trips over Kofuku and the stolen funds fall out. Ashamed, he runs away, but Yato's not done with him. He accepts the job and heads out to find him. But Hiori blocks him on his way and compels him to treat him better as a human being and not as a mere Regalia. And in the midst of all this, Yukune runs into Nora and she breaks his heart with more words, but luckily Yato shows up in time and changes Yukune into his sword form. Together they hunt a phantom, but Yato realizes that Yukune ain't gone super dull on him, and he pours purification water on Yukune and uses him to rend the phantom. After that, he sends Nora on her way by rejecting her again. The next day, Hiori finds Yato and Yukune trying to sneak a peek in the girl's bathroom. So she lets the fist do a talking, but our boys confirm they weren't trying to be boys, they were actually on a job. Yato snitches on the dude who called them, this guy named Ogiwara, who is hiding in the women's bathroom. After getting another round of butt whooping, he explains that he was being bullied and he thought a great place to hide was in the women's bathroom. Great choice. Not. Yukune gets caught hating on Ogiwara-kun for being such a weakling, and Yato points out that he's hating on someone that's just like him. This blows Yukune's fuse and he storms off. Before leaving, Yato gives Ogiwara a weapon and warns him that if he takes out his vengeance on his bullies, he would cease being a human. Meanwhile, Yukune heads off to class and tries to live like a normal human being, but when the real students come, they can't even see him. And this triggers his abandonment issues because he's all alone. Later, Hiori finds Yato and punches him when he catches her sneaking a peek. Ogiwara goes to exact his vengeance, and he hands the dude a penknife to make the fight fair. But as he draws closer, the bully pees his pants, and in the end, Ogiwara doesn't want to fight him, and he lets the guy go. Yato informs Hiori that he knew the kid would win the fight and stay on the straight and narrow, but things get really bad. Yukune's mind suddenly shatters because he wants to be a kid so bad. He grabs a baseball bat and starts smashing things, and at the same time, Yato just basically passes out. And finally, Hiori realizes that she's not caring for Yukune by spoiling him. She grabs Yato and heads down to Kofuku's place. Oh, great. Just great. Yato's at the point of death, and at the risk of sounding like a broken record, you could have avoided all of this. First thing first, how about you unname Yukune? I know, you're probably thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm heartless. Two wrongs don't make a right, and there's no way Yato can help Yukune if he's out of commission. Because first things first, you gotta get Yato safe. The only reason Yato is getting freaking blighted because Yukune is committing all of this stuff while he's Yato's master. But if Yato is no longer Yukune's master, Yukune would most likely have to bear the weight of his sins by himself. Nothing teaches you better than personal experience. And that's why letting Yukune experience the true pain of his wrong decisions for himself would honestly help him and mature faster. Tough love, you know? And if Yato just knew to draw the line sooner, this would not be happening. But that's not all. Second mistake. You're giving Yukune way too much leeway. It's a rebellious kid. He's being enabled. Yato should have been more strict and controlling with him and deciding where he's allowed into and where he's not. By their contract, they're always connected irrespective of where he goes. You can use that to your advantage and keep Yukune in places where he cannot harm himself or anyone. Like, keep him in a sword sheath for a while. Inhumane? Probably. Demonic? Maybe, but hey, gets the job done. Yukune only changes to human form when Yato allows it. That means, until we come to an agreement, keep the annoying kid in the freaking holster, alright? And once Yukune agrees to listen to Yato more, let the kid out and start treating him nice. Okay, good cop, bad cop routine. And by respecting Yukine a smidgen, they will be able to start see each other as equals. And finally, we're going to have a talk with Yukine. Because much of what Yato is going through should not have happened. Because he knows what's going on with Yukine because he has the kid's memories. Honestly, talk no jutsu works great. But when they get there, Osan draws a borderline and keeps them out. But Osan pities Hiori because she's been blighted by carrying Yato. So he lets her into his border and Kofuku gives her holy water to wash off the blight. And then he tells him the only way to help Yato is to perform something really special on Yukine. But to do that, he would need 2 more Regalia. And as he steps out, Osan warns Yukine that if he takes a single step from where he is, he will kill him. After that, he heads out to find more Regalia. The first Regalia agrees to come help Yato, and it is a former Regalia, Tomone, now called Mayu, under Tenjin's service. After getting Mayu, every other one is like, frick no. So he returns back to Kofuku's place, super bummed out. But Hiori's like, nah, frick that, I'm not gonna take no for an answer. So she does the one thing Kazuma said she should never do. She goes straight to Bishamon's temple, calls Kazuma out to help her. And the nerd boy's got a soft spot for Yato, so he shows up just in time, and Yukine tries to run away in shame, but he gets caught, and then Osan forces him to take off his shirt, and that's when we see the source of Yato's blight. Turns out Yukine is already turning into a phantom, and Kazuma suggests that Yato revoke him, but Yato's just stubborn. He refuses. So they draw a 3-way border and tell Yukine to confess his sins. But he refuses and claims that he did it all because he's dead and he has no future. He starts morphing into a full phantom, and it's honestly not looking good for Yato. But Yato is like refusing to renounce him, and that's when Hiori joins the fray with her voice and calls out to Yukine as he's about to cross full on into phantom mode, and it does give though Yato the strength to call out too. And they finally start talking out, and Yukine starts confessing, and slowly they begin to get better before everything finally returns to normal. Everyone is exhausted, obviously, but from it, Yato and Yukine apologize and thank Hiori for saving their lives. A few days later, things return back to normal, and Yukine joins a shop to work so he can pay back the things he stole. He also gets Hiori as his teacher to give him her old books. The trio heads down to Tenjin's shrine to thank him for lending Mayu to them. After Mayu and Hiori leave, Yato asks Tenjin for advice on how to help Hiori with her ghost mode. Tenjin gives him a really simple solution. Yato should just cut ties with Hiori permanently, because if she can't remember him, she'll stop slipping out of her body. Meanwhile, Hiori links up with her friends and they tell her about a new god of calamity that everyone is now praying to, this guy called Rabo. That evening, Hiori invites Yato and Yukine to join her for a New Year festival at Tenjin's shrine. She dresses up in this cute little kimono and heads out, and after the New Year prayers, Hiori sees Yato and chases after him without realizing that her body is fallen. However, what she doesn't know is that Yato is actually late to the ceremony because he had a lot of work to do. On their way, Yato and Yukine run into a group of phantoms, and they spend most of their time slicing and dicing. When they're done, they rush off to Hiori, but they have no idea this god called Rabo has been watching them, and he's not impressed. Meanwhile, Hiori runs into Nora, and Nora attacks her with these dogs. She gets super lucky because the sun comes up just in time to end the dog's attack on her. Nora informs Yukine that things are about to get more serious because Rabo only woke up to exact vengeance on Yato by slaying him. Before leaving, Nora tells Hiori to stop existing if she wants Yato to win the fight. After watching his fight, Rabo's not impressed, but surprisingly, when Yato and Yukine meet up with Hiori, she's got no memory of Yato, and she only remembers Yukine. Yato is freaking out, and he decides to help her regain her memories by leading her to all the places they've been through. But that doesn't work. He gets home and tries to create a manga of all their time together, and he's actually a pretty good artist. And while heading to Hiori's place to show her the art, they run into Nora, and she tells them that she took Hiori's memories. Before they can all get chummy, Rabo shows up and grabs Nora as his weapon and attacks Yato. Yato changes Yukine and gets into a fighting mode, and Rabo's like, meh, not impressed. Rabo pulls off some really cool, like, water-based attacks, but Yato dodges like it's nothing. And Rabo's like really trying to awaken the God Slayer in Yato, but Yukine pulls him back just before he enters into full-on Batosai mode, which is actually really freaking cool. But they fight, and phantoms gather. However, Rabo gets bored and leaves because Yato's like already injured and they can't continue the fight. But before Nora disappears, she tells Yato that if he can best Rabo, she will give Hiori her memories back. Oh boy, that's manipulation at its finest. That is a deal with the devil. Knowing everything you know about Nora, this is a bad plan. We gotta do something else to get our girl's memories back before we really consider fighting with Rabo. So to do this, we need to use a technique for reaccessing lost memories. Contrary to popular opinion, you can get your old memories back. You just don't know how to do it yet. The hippocampus is located in the temporal lobe of our brains, and it is the key structure for memory formation, and particularly for converting short-term memories into long-term memories. But when we lose memories, it means something has gone wrong in the relay. In Hiori's case, most of her memories of Yato are emotional because he is very dear to her. That means we have to find a way to restore both her amygdala and her thalamus to allow her to touch her emotional core, allow it to be restored. So to do this, Yato had the right idea of taking her back to places where she's been before, but the execution is not good. What Yato is trying to do was reawaken Hiori's contextual memory. It refers to the ability to recall information or events more effectively when the context present during learning is similar to the context present during remembering. But to do this, you gotta get all the memories that he needs to recreate this. So, from the drawing of Milord, he should have taken her to see the cat, and from there straight to the hospital bed where they met in exact order, and then take her to some key places where they interacted. Do this in sequence. This would help her memories trigger more quickly, and ideally, Hiori would be back to her old self in no time and foil Nora's grand plan. Kazuma heads down to Kofuku's place, where he learns that Rabo is alive and partly the cause of the many storm of phantoms. He tells Kofuku about Yato and Rabo, but when Yato heads down to Tenjin's place, Tenjin says it's for the best that she doesn't remember, but that doesn't sit well with Yukune. So he takes it on himself to complete Yato's art and show it to Hiori. They meet in the evening and he tells her their story. Meanwhile, Nora sneaks up on Yato and tries to pitch Hiori's memories to Yato. At the same time, Hiori forgets Yukune, and turns out what Nora did was steal all Hiori's memories, and they're gradually disappearing. And when they all do, she would become an empty shell. When Yato notices this, he decides that he's going to get her memories back, but as usual, Hiori touches him as he's about to disappear. So she enters ghost mode and accompanies them without having any idea of who they are. They arrive at Rabo's shrine and the fated battle begins. Lots of slashing. But Yato is too weak. He puts him in a water prison. But surprisingly, for someone who doesn't remember anything, Hiori saves him in time. Again, Rabo is not impressed, because Yato doesn't have the look of depravity that he's looking for. So he goes after Hiori, but Yato protects her. And to get Yato angry enough, Rabo destroys Hiori's memories, and at the same time, Hiori passes out for good. And Yato gets really serious. He slashes Rabo, and in one hit, Rabo is like almost toast. Turns out Yato really is badass when he's serious. He bests Rabo in one move, and now he has a sword in Rabo's neck. But this was all according to plan. He ingests himself with a storm of phantoms to make himself equal to Yato's anger, but it's still not enough. However, just as Yato is about to spring his final attack, Yukune tells him that Hiori is about to get crushed by a rock. So he's like, meh, skip that plan and goes to save Hiori. Meanwhile, even without her memory, as soon as Hiori inhales our boy's pheromones, her buried memories come flooding back because that stank is the best stank in the world. Yato is about to leave her to continue his fight, and they have a cute little, oh, that's a nice moment, but she gets self-conscious immediately and kicks the poop right out of Yato. It's adorable. But then Rabo grabs her immediately and tries to get Yato to continue the fight. Yato can see that Rabo is hell-bent on killing Hiori, so he gets serious and clips Rabo once and for all. He expels the phantoms in Rabo and ends the reign of this god of calamity with one awesome hit. All over the area, the gods can tell that one god is dead, but Nora's not done cooking. She grabs Rabo's mask and says that she needs to go back to her father. Turns out there's someone more dangerous behind the scene, and Yato's trials have only begun. On their way home, Yato tells Hiori about Tenjin's solution to her problem. He's ready to cut ties with her, but Hiori bluntly refuses. She argues like a freaking Sakura and saying, they'll find another way, and saying she's not gonna lose him. In the midst of all of this, Nora gets ready for her next attack. And this time, Yato might not survive, because Nora has her eyes set on an even more dangerous god.